Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow. You're joining us here on this very special conversation as we're counting down to the budget on the Leaders of Tomorrow Budget Edition special tonight. We're putting the spotlight on the SME and MSME sector. What does this very crucial sector hope to hear from the government this time around on Budget Day? To decode just that, to answer just that, we have three experts joining us on the panel tonight. Let me quickly introduce them. Vinod Kumar, President, India SME Forum. Gaurav Hazra, Senior Director and Head, India Markets at NASSCOM. Chandrakant Salunkhe, Founder and President, SME Chamber of India and SME Export Promotion Council. Vinod, Gaurav, Mr. Salunkhe, so good having you joining us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, talking about what it is SMEs, MSMEs, India's largest base of businesses, forming up that largest base of India Inc., are expecting to see from the government. And thank you for joining us to count down to the budget on this special series we're doing on the Leaders of Tomorrow. I want to start by talking about some headlines not too long ago in terms of ease of doing business. India jumping 14 places to come to 63rd. That's amongst 190 companies. I want to start on that positive note. What more in your mind perhaps should the government do if it wants to continue easing up doing business in the country, particularly for small businesses, particularly as we're looking at growth really coming back into the economy? Open to the three of you, but Vinod, if I could come to you first.
Thank you, Sunanda, for the opportunity to be here today. The first thing is, it's a great step forward when we're talking about the number of places we've moved up the table. And there's the same thing that we've also done in terms of lots of other indexes, including the Women Development Index. Now, coming to the point that, when you look at what the central government is doing vis-a-vis, ease of doing business, and you would normally expect a certain amount of reflection of that in terms of states. And what I feel now, what the government has been trying to do is actually get states to look at all the various things that they need to do. They need to put in place, because ultimately industry is primarily a state subject, where each state needs to take forward so many steps in order to move forward. So I think at the state level, what the government is doing now with the NITI Aayog and other agencies which are working with the states, that is the most important part, where finally it will be about, the cup meets the lip.
Sure. Gaurav?
Yeah, I think while, we have jumped on the index and it's a very encouraging stat, but if you dive down a little bit into the details, you will see India still lags significantly in contract execution. And I think my fellow panelists will agree to this. While the cursory numbers have jumped quite a bit, but actual business happening and our ability to execute contract has not really improved. What it really means is, if I add to what Vinod said, procurement continues to be a state subject. And I think one of our biggest bottleneck of enabling domestic business or buying from SMEs have been the archaic procurement laws in the state. So unless we move to a progressive procurement regime, our ability to execute contracts would not improve, which would mean that governments in states will not be able to buy. I think that is one of the biggest indicator of how business happens in the country at the state level and with MSMEs and the state.
Okay. Mr. Salunkhe?
See, looking at the ease of doing business, particularly level playing field for the MSME sector, it's very important. And we are behind the central government and state governments for particularly to provide a level playing field. You look at particularly when we try to buy a land, suppose MSME is buying a land from the state development corporation. There are so many problems. There are so many hurdles. Even the online, you can't buy easily land, number one. Number two, you can't construct land properly because there is a licenses problem. And most importantly, the pollution board license. It is a very, very difficult task for MSME sector. And lastly, when they set up business out of the city and the far the city from the very industrial area is there, main problem is skilled manpower. the government, especially state government, should take guarantee that they will provide all the facility instantly for MSME sector. When they will get all the facility, they will manufacture or they will provide services to the large corporate.
All right, let's come to something that has also been in the news of late, and that's the big announcement as far as the production linked incentive, the PLI scheme, is concerned. But I want to talk about the relevance of that, or really the ambit for and the purview really of MSMEs. A lot of MSMEs saying that the investment, essentially, if I can simplify it, which will come under the PLI scheme, and where the government is saying that a certain sort of incentive or subsidy really being given under the PLI scheme should be made lower so that MSMEs also fall under that purview. This question is to the two of you, Mr. Salunkhe and Vinod. If you'd want to comment on how MSMEs can perhaps see really the benefit of what is being seen as a big move to push domestic manufacturing. What should MSMEs and SMEs really look forward to, perhaps by way of commentary from the government, to make it more relevant to them? Mr. Salunkhe, first to you.
See, when Honorable Prime Minister announced that Atmanirbhar Bharat and to making the Atmanirbhar MSME sector, if we have to give a fight to buy China product, if we have to avoid buying China product, we have to empower MSME sector for particularly, product link incentive scheme. According to my knowledge, according to my efforts, that when we are buying product from China, which product we are buying? Electronics product, electricals product, advanced technological developed product, reverse engineering product. So if MSME sector will get all the facility at a time, on time, and link all this, the segment wise, particularly the sector wise. I'm sure that this PLI scheme will definitely useful for the MSME sector. And even I have suggested the government that they should think about manufacturing the different product which is we are buying or importing from the other parts of the world. That is more efforts government should take forward.
Okay. Any specific products you can mention on the show?
See, usually electronics product because medical devices. When the pandemic started, where we face a problem, all medical equipments, diagnosis equipments, we are buying from Europe. It is very costly. We are buying from China, costs less, but the product is not a long term can be utilized. But medical equipments, essential product manufacturing, and mostly the electronics product and electricals product. If we focus more, I'm sure that even I'm working with the Ministry of Electronics, and we are setting up around 4 electronics park for MSME sector in India. So that is the most important initiative we are doing, and especially for the MSME sector.
Okay, so electricals, electronics, medical equipment, some of the sectors that perhaps will require much more of a push under the PLI scheme is what Mr. Salunkhe is saying. Vinod, let me come to you. What do you think the government perhaps needs to do to make the PLI scheme more relevant?
Suranda, as Mr. Salunkhe has said, we need to bring down the limits. The bottom limits, as far as investment are concerned, those need to be
Yeah,
brought down. Definitely, there's no two ways about it. Because essentially, if you look at all the products that incentives have been offered on, in this drive up to the Atmanirbhar Bharat dream of the Honorable Prime Minister, what is more important is that all these sectors are primarily SME heavy. In fact, let me take all of us back to the fact that, after the change in definition of the MSMEs, today, 99.29% of the enterprises are SMEs or MSMEs as we know them today. So essentially, if it is not going to be catered to them, so essentially then what we are saying is we're only catering to 0.72% or 71% of the industries,
yeah,
which is not what is the intention of the Honorable Prime Minister or the government thereafter. You name any sector primarily, there is millions of small medium enterprises which are in this space, and I don't think it is the intention of the government to intentionally leave these guys out of the Atmanirbhar push. And I'm sure they are looking at this is only the first phase of where they want the larger companies to come in. I'm sure the government will
sure.
look at getting in the smaller ones too.
Okay. Another thing which is going to be a growth enabler, according to almost 70% of all MSMEs who are polled in reports publicly available, Gaurav, are saying technology is what is that one thing that's going to help them come back onto the path of growth. But they're hoping to see more announcements from the government when it comes to supporting investments into technology. What do you think needs to be done on the part of the government, Gaurav?
So I'll just elaborate this a little bit. See, we based on research, what we see is the adoption of technology by non-tech SMEs in India is less than 4%, which is very serious because if you see in the situation where we had last year a start and stop economy, technology can actually mitigate so much risk, including risk of payroll, risk of logistics, supply chain, and even risk of automation and shop floor control in many instances where you can probably operate a shop floor with lesser people and more automation. The the key really is if you see in the last few years between when we started selling tech and now, I think the introduction of SaaS and cloud tools have significantly reduced the entry barrier for MSMEs to adopt technology. If you go back 10 years and if I was an MSME wanted to implement an ERP, I would have to look at buying servers, getting people, databases, licenses, and so on and so forth, and which will be a very high entry barrier. And I think all SMEs should look at tech not as a cost, but as a serious amount of investment to stay relevant in their own businesses. I think government, if I go back and see the schemes that MSME department comes with from time to time, and I'm sure my co-panelists know it much better than we do in terms of manufacturing SMEs, there are a lot of helps available in different schemes, but they are more focused on manufacturing technology. Am I implementing new machines? Am I implementing new technology? Am I implementing a new robo line or a shop floor? But what we are talking about is horizontal, broad-based technology.
Okay.
Bread and butter tech, for example, in ERP, supply chain, CAD, design. I think the government needs to simplify these schemes so that people can now look at software technology, SaaS technology, and not just brick and mortar tech. I think that's a shift
Sure.
that we're looking at. Tech is not just
Okay.
about buying machinery anymore. I think
Okay.
that's the realization that has come to us in this last 1 year, and that needs to be incentivized by the government.
Gentlemen, I have to take a quick break on that note. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And tonight, we're continuing to count down to the budget with a breakup of the expectations from the SME and MSME sector. I do want to talk taxation specifically with regards to what the government perhaps should be doing as the whole shift has really happened in terms of how we're going to be working and how everyone's working. What do you want urgently to see from the government, Gaurav, when it comes to work from home, commentary around taxation, anything that you want to see?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. This whole work from home and hybrid model is probably going to stay. I mean, while it is not relevant to many industries where you need to have people to operate machinery, especially the segment that Mr. Salunkhe represents and Vinod represents, you have to be there, but in a lot of segments which are predominantly service
Yeah.
oriented, we are seeing a huge shift where people are doing this balancing act between work from home and work from office or work from residence, things like that.
Yeah.
I think there are a few things that we also suggested to the government in our own budget submission. One of them is that to make this shift possible and productive and making sure that employees work safely within the confines of their residences, there are a lot of costs that companies incur to enable people going back home and working. For example, laptops, work desks, bandwidth, things like that, which is traditionally not the case in Indian economy. Now, all of these expenses should not be actually looked as perks for employees. They are not perks. They're just to help them operate the way they would have operated in the office. So they should be treated like a conveyance expense that I spend today to go to
Okay.
office. So instead of going to office, I'm going to spend that money on bandwidth. So I should not be taxed because I'm spending money on bandwidth instead of having to take a cab to office. I think they are one and the same thing in
Yeah.
today's parlance. So this
Sure.
one very fundamental area where taxation should be looked at, especially personal taxation. And the other thing is there
Okay.
are certain prerequisites. For instance, when I'm operating in a SEZ, I need to maintain certain number of people within the brick and mortar facility. Now, this will become more and more irrelevant in the case of service sector because people will continue to work from home, and
Hmm.
as industry should not suffer on their tax holidays or tax rebate just because they are not able to move 1,000 people into an office. I think these are
Sure.
some of the underlying broad-based aspects on taxation that should be looked at when you look at the work from home model or work 2.0, including
Okay. Sure.
reimbursements that help people on work from home should not be actually looked at perks.
Okay, very, very relevant points, Gaurav. Hopefully, something will come on that. We're speaking taxation, so let me sort of broaden my questions and talk about a couple of things under taxation. First is GST. A lot of people have been asking for simplification of GST. Vinod, I do know you're one of them. What urgently do you want to hear from the government in the budget when it comes to GST?
Well, there are two or three things, Surendra, that need to happen immediately as far as MSMEs go. The very important
Hmm.
point here is, on one hand, we've let people that have turnovers less than 20 lakhs out of the entire GST ambit. And the second thing is that we've at the same time seen a lot of these MSMEs are unable to sell interstate A, B. So we are trying to restrain them to their local areas. We're trying to restrain them so that they don't grow their business beyond 20 lakhs, which is sort of a corollary to what we would normally expect from a GST, which is nationwide, one nation, one tax. So essentially, my feeling is the least the government can do is offer a 50% rebate to small medium enterprises that are less than 6 crores. And my feeling
Okay.
is those are not a very large contributors today to the GST net. And instead, the
Okay.
government should get everybody under the GST net, because even though those that are outside less than 20 lakh which turnovers, those that are outside,
Sure.
even they would love to come into this. And government
Sure.
should do away with the composition and everything else, but rationalize it. Let's say, for example, every stuff, let's say you have a 18%, the SME should have 9%. That will give a little more competitive edge to the guy. Both in terms of,
Okay.
on one hand, we say buy Indian, buy local, but then here is your SME who is trying to manufacture, and the least we can do is give him a little amount of incentive there. It's very, very important
Okay.
when it comes to things like that. And this, I'm sure the government won't feel the pinch when it comes to numbers in terms of the collection, but I'm sure it'll actually broaden the collection net. Apart from the
Okay.
fact that we need to bring petrol and diesel into the GST tax net, because that is a huge, huge spend for small medium enterprises.
Fair enough. Mr. Salunkhe, I do want you to respond also to the comments on GST that Vinod has made. But if you can talk about lending and the lending atmosphere really for small businesses, extremely crucial. The most important thing, if I can in fact say that, for small businesses, what by way of commentary should the government do? They have many schemes, including under Atmanirbhar Bharat, when it comes to making life easier as far as raising funds for small businesses, but the effectiveness really of that is being called into question time and again. What do you want to see from the government?
See, in the first phase of the interaction with the finance minister, I have submitted my suggestions to the government that number one, to make all GST transactions between MSME sector 5%. This is a big demand from me. If we are doing business between MSME, 5%. If MSME is availing any professional services, 5%, not 18%, because most of the MSMEs are not availing because they have to pay 18%. And third,
Yeah.
most importantly, I have demanded that up to 2 crore MSME should be exempted, because 2 crore is not a big amount now, looking at the current scenario. So up to 2
Hmm.
crore should be exempted. Even the government is not considered to, at least they will come out to 1 crore. That is one. Fourth very important point I have raised, that collateral free loan to make for a small entrepreneur, small enterprises up to 15 crore, and medium sized industries for a 35 crore. Because most of them, this should be depend on the cash flow basis, because
Sure.
MSMEs are usually working on the cash flow basis, and government should focus and initiate that system from the through RBI to all the bank to bring the cash flow based sector. And another point I have asked the finance minister, that those MSMEs becoming sick, revival segment should be, very, very different, because MSME sector, particularly those are supplying to large corporate and they are not listing on the trades platform. That is the most important, seriously government should look into.
While we're going to wait to hear from the government, of course, in terms of all of the demands which experts like yourself are laying before the finance minister, just two more things that I do want to discuss before we close today's panel. 30-second closing comments. If I can come to you first, Gaurav, ESOPs and taxation of ESOPs and simplification of that, something that NASSCOM has been asking for a while. Just sort of, if you can run us through that for our viewers.
What we're really asking for is that ESOP should be taxed when the employee or the beneficiary has made a sale or realizes the money into the bank, because that is the right spirit of taxation of ESOPs. So this will tremendously arm smaller companies and startups to use ESOP as a currency to attract and retain talent, when anyway cash
Okay.
is low in the current times and the time to come. So our submission really is that ESOPs granted should be taxed at the point of sale.
Okay. Mr. Salunkhe, while the government is talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat to promote the domestic market, I do want to talk about exports and, how that is so crucial for small businesses. If any sort of commentary on how exports can be made more beneficial for SMEs and MSMEs, what do you want to hear?
See, we are working with more than 120 Indian embassies abroad, particularly to promote exports of the MSME sector. And this is the right time, because in the pandemic, so many companies are closed down. They are not working fully. They are not working, producing the properly. So this is the right time to identify the European market, US market, Canada market, America market, and mostly in the African as well as the MENA market. So this is the right time, because government is, putting efforts for the exports, but they are not focusing more on the product wise. So we are working with around say 20 product now, and that 20 product can be exported in this year. So automatically we will enhance our exports. So that is mine, especially incentive wise.
Okay. Vinod, I'm going to let you have the last word. What do you
Sure.
perhaps hope to hear from the FM?
The first thing is that World, World Trade Organization last year talked about the fact that India has a 300 plus billion dollars worth of export, and
Yeah.
India has a potential in the very same tariff lines of taking the export to $512 billion. On the other hand, when we look at the number of exporters, Sunanda, we're talking about 35,000 odd people that are active exporters today. And then
Sure.
we talk about 6.5 crore enterprises. So what are the rest 6 crore doing? It's a miracle that only these 35,000 odd enterprises are exporting 312 billion. Now tell me, if we were to actually orient even 10% of the remaining 6 crores, you would automatically have a growth in exports. So a little
Sure.
bit of focus on exports with an export enablement fund that can primarily look at each and every Indian product that is complying to an Indian standard needs to be taken to and complied with any international standard, so that he's able to sell the product very easily. A. B.
Sure.
Hosted buyer programs, which with every state there should be 500 buyers every month coming to each cluster in India. Now those are the things that
Okay.
we need primarily to immediately take this economy and turn it around and boost exports.
And we're definitely looking forward to that for small businesses here in India. Vinod, Gaurav, Mr. Salunkhe, thank you so much for your time here on the show. Completely out of time, but if you have any feedback for us, for those of you watching at home, do let us know. Our contact details is up on your screens as you're watching. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.